The school bus rumbled down the quiet suburban street, its yellow paint gleaming under the morning sun. Inside, kids laughed and chatted, completely unaware of the strange scene about to unfold. The bus slowed to a stop at the intersection, but before it could move again, two police dogs, large German shepherds, stepped directly in front of it, blocking the way. The driver, Mr. Thompson, frowned. He tapped the horn lightly, expecting the dogs to move. But they didn't. They just stood there, ears perked, staring at the bus as if it held some terrible secret. Behind the dogs, their handler, Officer Reynolds, jogged up, his face twisted in confusion. "What's going on, boy?" he muttered, tugging gently at the leash. But the dogs refused to budge. One of them even let out a low growl, his eyes locked onto the bus. The kids inside fell silent, sensing something was wrong. A little girl in the front seat pressed her hands against the window, her breath fogging up the glass. "Why won't the doggies move?" she whispered. Mr. Thompson rolled down his window. "Everything okay, officer?" he called out. Officer Reynolds shook his head, his expression turning serious. No, it's not. These dogs are trained to detect danger. And right now, they're telling us this bus isn't safe." A chill ran through the air. The kids exchanged nervous glances. What did that mean? What was wrong with the bus? Mr. Thompson's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The bus had just passed its safety inspection last week. How could there be any danger? He glanced in the rearview mirror at the wide-eyed children, their earlier laughter now replaced with uneasy silence. Officer Reynolds pulled out his radio. "We need backup at the corner of Elm and Maple. Possible threat involving a school bus." His voice was calm, but the urgency was clear. Within minutes, two more patrol cars screeched to a halt, their lights flashing. Officers surrounded the bus, their hands hovering near their holsters. One of the police dogs, Rex, suddenly lunged forward, barking fiercely at the bus's undercarriage. His partner, Duke, circled the back tires, sniffing aggressively. Officer Reynolds' face paled. "They're signaling explosives," he muttered under his breath. Gasps erupted from inside the bus. A boy in the third row started crying. "Are we gonna blow up?" he whimpered. Mr. Thompson's heart pounded. He had to stay calm for the kids. "Everyone, listen carefully," he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "We're going to exit the bus, slowly and quietly, no pushing, no running." As the children began filing out, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "Wait!" A mechanic in greasy overalls jogged toward them, waving his arms. "I just saw something under that bus yesterday. I thought it was just a loose wire." Officer Reynolds narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about?" The mechanic swallowed hard. "I work at the depot. Last night, when I was closing up, I saw someone crouched under this bus. I figured it was just a routine check. But now," his voice trailed off. The officers exchanged glances. This wasn't just a malfunction. Someone had tampered with the bus. The mechanic's words hung heavy in the air. Someone had deliberately tampered with the school bus. Officer Reynolds immediately barked orders into his radio, calling for the bomb squad and evacuating the surrounding buildings. Parents, who had gathered to see why their children hadn't arrived at school, were now being pushed back behind police tape, their faces twisted with fear. Inside the bus, the last few kids were being carefully escorted out by officers when suddenly, Rex, the lead police dog, let out a sharp whine and backed away from the front tire. His tail tucked between his legs, an unmistakable sign of fear. Duke, usually fearless, mirrored his partner's behavior, his ears flattening against his skull. "What's wrong with them?" one of the officers muttered. Before anyone could react, a faint ticking noise started coming from beneath the bus. The sound was soft, almost imperceptible, but in the sudden silence that had fallen over the scene, it was unmistakable. Mr. Thompson's blood ran cold. "That wasn't there before," he whispered. Officer Reynolds grabbed his arm. "Before what?" "The engine. It was making a weird noise earlier, but I thought it was just old wiring. What if whatever's under there is set to go off when the bus reaches a certain speed?" The bomb squad arrived in a flurry of activity, their heavy gear clanking as they rushed toward the bus. The lead technician, a grizzled man with a grim expression, dropped to his knees and peered underneath. His face went slack. "We've got a problem," he said. "This isn't just a simple explosive. It's rigged with a motion sensor, probably set to detonate once the bus hits a main road." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The children, now safely across the street, clung to each other, their small bodies trembling. One little girl, no older than 6, tugged on an officer's sleeve. "Is the bad man gonna hurt us?" she asked, her voice shaking. Before the officer could answer, a sharp cry cut through the tension. "Look out!" A shadowy figure darted from behind a nearby building, sprinting toward a parked motorcycle. One of the officers gave chase, but the suspect was fast, too fast. Just as he reached the bike, he turned back, his face obscured by a hood, and hurled something toward the crowd. A small, metallic cylinder clattered onto the pavement. "Flashbang!" someone screamed. The world exploded in blinding light and deafening noise. People dropped to the ground, covering their ears. By the time the spots cleared from their vision, the suspect was gone, leaving only the fading roar of his motorcycle in the distance. Officer Reynolds cursed under his breath. This wasn't just an attempted bombing. It was a coordinated attack, and the attacker had just gotten away. But then, as the bomb squad worked frantically to defuse the device, Rex suddenly perked up. His nose twitched, and without warning, he took off down the street, dragging his handler behind him. "Rex, what the—" Officer Reynolds stumbled, struggling to keep up. The dog was zeroing in on something, or someone. Duke, not wanting to be left behind, bolted after them, his powerful legs eating up the pavement. The officers exchanged glances. The dogs had a scent. And they weren't stopping. The 2 German shepherds sprinted down the street with single-minded determination, their powerful muscles propelling them forward as their claws scraped against the asphalt. Officer Reynolds barely managed to keep hold of Rex's leash as the dog charged ahead, his nose glued to an invisible trail. Duke followed close behind, his ears pinned back in focus. "Where the hell are they going?" One of the backup officers panted as he struggled to keep pace. Rex didn't slow down. He took a sharp turn into a narrow alleyway between 2 rundown apartment buildings, his tail stiff with urgency. The smell he was tracking was strong, too strong to ignore. The officers followed, their hands hovering over their holsters, unsure what they were about to find. Then, suddenly, Rex skidded to a stop in front of a rusted maintenance door at the back of one of the buildings. He let out a deep, guttural growl, his hackles raised. Duke mirrored the stance, his teeth bared. Officer Reynolds didn't hesitate. He kicked the door open, his gun drawn. Inside, the dimly lit room smelled of oil and chemicals. Workbenches were cluttered with wires, tools, and, most chilling of all, several half-assembled devices that looked eerily similar to the one under the school bus. "This is a bomb-making workshop," Reynolds breathed. But the room was empty. Whoever had been here had fled. Recently, judging by the still-warm coffee mug on the table. Then Rex lunged toward a pile of discarded backpacks in the corner, sniffing furiously. He clamped his jaws around one and dragged it toward the officers. Reynolds unzipped it and froze. Inside was a student ID, from the same school as the kids on the bus. A twist no one saw coming. The name on the ID was Jake Morrison, a 16-year-old junior, honor roll student, debate team captain. No one would have ever suspected him. But as Reynolds flipped through the other contents of the bag, his stomach turned. Diagrams of the school bus routes, notes on explosive compounds, and a handwritten list titled, "Reasons They Deserve This." The officers exchanged horrified glances. This wasn't just some random terrorist. This was one of their own students. The dogs lead them deeper. Just as they were processing this revelation, Duke let out a sharp bark and bolted toward another door at the back of the workshop. This one led to a set of stairs going down into the building's basement. The officers followed, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. At the bottom of the stairs they found something even more disturbing: a makeshift shrine, newspaper clippings about school shootings, photos of the school's faculty and students with some faces angrily circled in red, and in the center of it all, a live camera feed showing the still evacuated school bus surrounded by police. Jake wasn't just planning an attack. He was watching them right now. A voice in the shadows. Then, from somewhere in the darkness, a voice crackled over an old radio left on a table. "You're too late." The officers spun around, guns raised, but there was no one there. The voice continued, distorted and eerie. "I had to do it. They made me do it. You'll see." Then a click. Silence. Rex and Duke both let out low whines, their noses pointed toward a ventilation grate in the wall. Fresh air was coming through it. Jake had escaped. Again. The clock is ticking back at the bus. The bomb squad finally gave the all clear. The device had been disarmed, but the relief was short-lived. Because now they had a new problem. A teenage boy with a grudge, knowledge of explosives, and a head start. And no one knew where he was going to strike next. The discovery of Jake Morrison's involvement sent shockwaves through the police team. Officer Reynolds immediately radioed for backup, his voice tight with urgency as he described the teen bomber now on the run. Meanwhile, Rex and Duke continued sniffing around the basement workshop, their noses leading them to a crumpled piece of paper half buried under a toolbox. Reynolds carefully unfolded it, revealing a handwritten journal entry dated just 3 days prior. The words were scrawled in frantic handwriting, ink smudged in places as if written during emotional distress. "They said it would stop if I just ignored them. But the locker shoves, the lunch tray spills, the accidental tripping in hallways never stopped. And when I showed Principal Hendricks the bruises, he said, 'Boys will be boys.' Well, now they'll see what this boy can really do." The officers exchanged grim looks. This wasn't just an act of terrorism. It was the boiling over of relentless bullying the system had ignored. Across town, parents were being notified about the lockdown situation when Mrs. Morrison suddenly screamed, dropping her phone. Her husband rushed over to find her staring at Jake's open laptop, where a live countdown timer ticked down from 47 minutes alongside a chilling message. "If they won't listen to words, maybe they'll listen to fire." The screen then cut to a live feed showing the school's crowded gymnasium, where an unsuspecting pep rally was underway. Mrs. Morrison's hands trembled as she pointed to a barely visible wire snaking along the bleachers in the video feed. Jake had already planted another device. Back at the bomb workshop, Duke suddenly became agitated, scratching at a seemingly blank section of the concrete wall. When officers pulled away a loose panel, they uncovered a meticulously organized map of the school, with red X's marking every entry point, and one circled in black with the words "Final Lesson" written beneath it. Reynolds' blood ran cold when he realized the black circle marked the school's boiler room, directly beneath the gym. The timeline clicked into horrifying focus. Jake wasn't just targeting the bus. The bus was meant to be a distraction to draw first responders away from the school while he executed his real plan. At that moment, Rex let out an urgent bark and bolted up the stairs, dragging his handler toward a forgotten evidence bag in the corner containing a janitor's uniform from the school. A sickening realization dawned. Jake wasn't fleeing. He was already back at the scene, blending in. The officers raced to their squad cars, sirens wailing, as the police chief's voice crackled over the radio with new urgency. All units, we have confirmed explosive materials missing from the chemistry lab inventory. Suspect may be wearing a disguise. I repeat, suspect is likely already on school grounds. Meanwhile, inside the school's bustling gymnasium, a figure in custodial coveralls quietly adjusted his glasses as he pushed a wheeled trash bin along the perimeter of the cheering crowd. No one noticed the faint blinking light coming from inside the bin. No one paid attention as he slipped out the side door, removing his gloves. And absolutely no one saw when he pulled a small remote from his pocket, his thumb hovering over the button as he whispered, "Now everyone will know what it feels like to be powerless." The pep rally's music reached a crescendo, just as Officer Reynolds' squad car screeched into the school parking lot. Rex and Duke leaped out before the vehicle fully stopped, their noses in the air as they caught a familiar scent on the wind, the same chemical residue from the workshop. The dogs took off toward the school's east entrance without hesitation, their urgent barks cutting through the noise of the cheering students inside. Reynolds drew his weapon as he followed, praying they weren't already too late. Somewhere in that building, a traumatized teenager was moments away from making a decision that would haunt hundreds of families forever. And the only ones who might stop him were two police dogs who'd refused to let a school bus pass that morning. The school's emergency lights began flashing as the lockdown alarm wailed through the hallways, but inside the packed gymnasium, the deafening cheers of students drowned out the warning. Principal Hendricks, standing near the basketball hoop with a microphone in hand, hadn't yet noticed the alert buzzing on his walkie-talkie. Officer Reynolds burst through the main doors with Rex and Duke straining at their leashes, their noses working frantically to separate the scent of sweat and popcorn from the telltale chemical odor they'd tracked from the workshop. The dogs made a beeline for the bleachers where, minutes earlier, a janitor had been spotted lingering near the support beams. Reynolds's radio crackled with updates from the bomb squad still sweeping the boiler room below them. They'd found wires running up through the ventilation shafts, confirming the gym was rigged to blow. At that moment, in the crowded stands, a sharp-eyed sophomore named Mia noticed something odd about the trash can near the exit. A faint red light pulsed through the cracks in its plastic lid, synchronized with a quiet beeping that shouldn't be there. Her blood turned to ice when she remembered the active shooter drills. If you see something, say something. But before she could stand, a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. "Don't scream," Jake whispered, his voice eerily calm as he pressed something cold and metallic against her ribs. "You're coming with me. They'll never evacuate in time unless I give them proof." Mia's terrified eyes darted to the object in Jake's other hand, a detonator with its safety switch already flipped off. Across the gym, Rex suddenly went rigid, his ears pricking forward. He'd caught Jake's scent mixed with gun oil and the acrid tang of nervous sweat. The dog lunged forward with such force that the leash slipped from Reynolds' grip. Students screamed as 90 pounds of trained canine plowed through the crowd, zeroing in on the bleachers where Jake was now dragging Mia toward a side exit. Duke followed in a flanking maneuver, cutting off Jake's escape route as teachers finally registered the danger and began herding students toward the opposite doors. Jake's facade cracked as he saw the dogs converging, Rex baring his teeth in a snarl, Duke circling to block the aisle, and in that moment of hesitation, Mia elbowed him hard in the stomach, breaking free as the detonator clattered to the floor. A collective gasp rippled through the gym as the device skidded toward the edge of the bleachers. Reynolds dove for it, his fingers grazing the plastic casing just as Jake made a desperate lunge. What happened next unfolded in slow motion. Rex's powerful jaws closed around Jake's forearm, not biting down but applying enough pressure to immobilize. Duke body-slammed the teen's legs, knocking him off balance. The detonator tumbled end over end, toward the gap between the bleachers and the wall, where it landed with a soft click directly on top of a previously hidden secondary device. The digital display flickered from 0058 to 0057. "Bomb!" Reynolds roared, scooping up the detonator only to realize with dawning horror that it was merely the transmitter. The real trigger was the motion-sensitive package now counting down beneath their feet. The evacuation turned to chaos as students stampeded toward exits, but the bomb squad's voice crackled over the radio with grim certainty. "There's no time. The device is synced to the fire suppression system. If we cut power, it blows." Jake, now pinned beneath Rex's weight, began to laugh. A broken, hollow sound. "It was never about killing them," he rasped. "I just wanted them to feel trapped, to know what it's like when no one helps you." His eyes locked onto Principal Hendricks, who stood frozen near the deflated remains of a spirit banner. "You watched it happen. You knew." In the boiler room below, technicians traced the wiring to a shocking discovery. The explosives were fake. The real danger was the canisters of anesthetic gas rigged to flood the gym, a twisted recreation of the locker room initiations Jake had endured. The countdown wasn't to destruction, but to exposure. As the timer hit 0030, Reynolds made a split-second decision, barking orders to override the HVAC system while keeping Rex and Duke positioned to prevent Jake from fleeing. The truth dawned on him. This broken kid didn't want martyrs. He wanted witnesses. Outside, news helicopters circled as parents screamed against police barricades. Inside, Mia, still trembling near the diffused bomb, suddenly pointed to Jake's discarded backpack, where the edge of a composition notebook peeked out. Its pages contained meticulous documentation of every bullying incident, every failed plea for help. The last entry, written that morning, contained a single underlined sentence: "Today, they'll finally see me." As SWAT teams breached the building, Jake stopped struggling against Rex's grip. His whispered confession would haunt Reynolds long after the crisis ended. The dogs were never part of the plan. They weren't supposed to care. As the bomb squad secured the gymnasium, Officer Reynolds noticed something peculiar about Jake's behavior. The boy kept glancing nervously at his watch, as if waiting for something else to happen. Rex, still holding Jake firmly but carefully, suddenly whined and turned his head toward the school's clock tower, an odd reaction that made Duke's ears perk up. Reynolds followed their gaze just as the tower's bell began to chime unnaturally, not its usual melodic tone, but a jarring electronic beep that echoed across the campus. At the third beep, every smartphone in the evacuation zone simultaneously buzzed with an incoming video message. The footage showed a shadowy figure in a black hoodie standing in what appeared to be the school's abandoned music storage room. The person's face was digitally obscured, but their voice came through crisp and calculated. "Jake Morrison, you were supposed to be our martyr, our voice, but you failed." The camera panned to reveal a wall covered in newspaper clippings, not about bullying, but about every major school attack in the past decade. The lesson continues without you. The feed cut to a live shot of the school's cafeteria, where students had been relocated during the evacuation. A single red dot of light pulsed beneath one of the lunch tables. Chaos erupted anew, as Reynolds realized with dawning horror Jake hadn't been working alone. He'd been manipulated by someone far more dangerous. The police dogs went into overdrive, Rex releasing Jake to join Duke and sniffing frantically at the air. Their behavior was different now, not tracking explosives, but something equally alarming. The dogs began sneezing violently as they approached the cafeteria doors, their noses detecting an odor their training had rarely encountered. A rare South American orchid extract used in advanced chemical weapons. Jake's face went sheet white. "That's not me. I didn't—" His protest was cut off by a thunderous crash from the direction of the music wing. The shadowy figure from the video had just blown open a sealed tunnel that connected to the town's historic underground railroad passages, a network of tunnels perfect for disappearing. Security cameras caught a glimpse of the perpetrator dragging a heavy duffel bag into the darkness before the feed cut out. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, the bomb squad made a chilling discovery. The device under the table wasn't explosive. It was a disperser unit designed to release a hallucinogenic compound that would induce panic and paranoia. The real threat became clear when they found the secondary device, a signal jammer that had been blocking all outgoing calls from specific student phones, the same students who had been Jake's primary tormentors. This wasn't just an attack. It was a meticulously planned psychological experiment. Reynolds grabbed Jake by the shoulders. "Who is helping you?" The boy's eyes filled with terrified tears as he stammered out a name no one expected. Mr. Voss, the chemistry teacher who had coincidentally taken a sudden sabbatical 2 weeks earlier after filing complaints about the school's lax anti-bullying policies. The same teacher whose daughter had committed suicide after relentless bullying 5 years prior. As the pieces fell into place, Rex and Duke began barking urgently at a ventilation grate in the cafeteria. Their sensitive noses detected traces of the orchid extract leading downward into the tunnel system. The dog's agitation confirmed the unthinkable. Voss wasn't fleeing. He was moving deeper into the school's infrastructure, possibly toward the main gas lines. The police chief's voice came through the radio with grim urgency. "We just got a hit on Voss's home computer. He's been live-streaming this entire event to a private dark web forum with over 20,000 viewers. This isn't revenge. It's a demonstration." At that moment, every electronic screen in the school flickered to life simultaneously, displaying a single message in blood-red letters. "Class dismissed." The moment the words "Class dismissed" flashed across every screen, the school's emergency lighting switched to an eerie crimson glow, casting long shadows through the hallways. Officer Reynolds immediately split the team, half to secure the students now trapped in the cafeteria, half to pursue Voss through the tunnels. Rex and Duke strained at their leashes, their noses twitching as they picked up the orchid scent mixed with something new, the sharp metallic tang of gasoline. The abandoned music storage room where Voss had filmed his message was now a gaping maw of darkness, the blown open tunnel entrance exhaling a damp, musty odor that made the dogs sneeze repeatedly. Reynolds clicked on his tactical flashlight, the beam cutting through dust particles swirling in the air as he led the descent. The ancient brick tunnels, originally part of the Underground Railroad, branched in multiple directions, but the dogs immediately veered left where the chemical scent grew stronger. Their paws scraped against uneven stones as the passage narrowed, forcing the officers to proceed single file. Every few yards, they passed strange markings, freshly spray-painted arrows pointing forward, alternating with disturbing phrases like, "They laughed too," and "Nothing changes." Duke suddenly stopped dead in his tracks, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Reynolds signaled for silence, as the beam of his flashlight illuminated a tripwire stretched across the tunnel at the ankle height. Following its path revealed it was connected to a series of mason jars filled with a viscous liquid, homemade napalm, judging by the gasoline smell. But what made Reynolds' blood run cold was the digital timer counting down from 12 minutes taped to the wall beside it. This wasn't just an obstacle, it was a deadline. A faint scraping sound echoed from somewhere ahead in the darkness. Rex's ears swiveled forward, his body tensing. Then, from the blackness, a voice called out, not Voss's but a young girl's, trembling and desperate. "Help me, please." The officers froze. No children had been reported missing in the evacuation. The voice came again, closer now. "He has me tied up. I can't." The plea cut off with a muffled scream that made Duke whine anxiously. Reynolds knew it could be a trap, but they couldn't risk ignoring a potential victim. Moving carefully past the tripwire, the team advanced toward the sound. The tunnel opened abruptly into a circular chamber where the town's historical society had once displayed underground railroad artifacts. Now, it looked like a madman's workshop. The walls were papered with blown-up photos of bullied students spanning decades, connected by red string to newspaper clippings about their suicides. At the center stood a makeshift altar with a single flickering candle, illuminating a framed picture of a smiling teenage girl, Voss's daughter, Sarah. But what made Reynolds' breath catch was the life-size mannequin positioned in a school desk, wearing a tattered prom dress, its face a grotesque wax replica of Sarah's. The voice had been coming from a small speaker tucked in its chest. Propped in the mannequin's lap was an open laptop showing a live feed of the school's main gas line control room, where the real threat became clear. Voss hadn't just targeted the school building. He'd tapped into the town's entire natural gas infrastructure. The timer on screen matched the one by the tripwire. 9:34, 9:33. Rex suddenly lunged toward a shadowy alcove, barking furiously. Duke scrambled after him, both dogs converging on a ventilation grate that rattled slightly, as if someone had just passed through it. Shining his light through the bars, Reynolds spotted a single black glove caught on the metal, and beneath it, a handwritten note. "You're focusing on the wrong explosion. The real blast will be when the world watches what your silence has created." The radio crackled with urgent updates. The bomb squad had found identical countdown timers synced across town. At the mayor's office, the police station, and worst of all, the middle school where Sarah had first been bullied. Voss wasn't just making a statement. He was holding the entire town hostage to force a reckoning about systemic bullying. As the timer ticked below 8 a.m., Reynolds noticed something the dogs had detected earlier. The orchid scent grew stronger near a seemingly solid brick wall. Pressing his palm against the cold stones, he felt a faint draft. Rex pawed insistently at a discolored brick, and when Reynolds pushed it, a hidden door swung inward with a groan, revealing a steep staircase leading upward. The air that rushed out carried voices. Children's voices. Not recorded, but real. Somewhere above them, Voss had taken actual hostages, and judging by the fresh gasoline trails leading up the stairs, he'd turned the town's historic underground railroad tunnels into a labyrinth of death. The narrow staircase spiraled upward into suffocating darkness, the only light coming from Reynolds' flickering flashlight as he climbed with Rex and Duke leading the way. The gasoline smell grew thicker with each step, mixing with another odor that made the dog's fur stand on end, the sour tang of fear sweat from multiple people. A faint whimpering echoed from above, the sound of someone trying desperately to stay quiet. Reynolds signaled his team to hold position as he reached the top step, his flashlight revealing a heavy metal door slightly ajar, rusted hinges groaning in protest, with every gust of wind from somewhere beyond it. Through the crack, Reynolds caught glimpses of movement, shadows shifting in erratic patterns. Then a voice, calm and measured, sent ice down his spine. "Countdowns at 6 minutes, children." That's how long you have to write letters to your parents explaining why you participated in Sarah's torment. It was Voss, but his tone had changed from the calculated menace of the videos to something far more unsettling, the cheerful cadence of a teacher conducting a classroom activity. Reynolds risked a wider look through the doorway. The space beyond was a forgotten fallout shelter from the 1950s, converted into a nightmarish mock classroom. 5 middle schoolers sat shackled to desks arranged in a semicircle, their faces streaked with tires as they scribbled on paper under Voss's watchful eye. The man himself stood at a chalkboard covered in chemical equations, his formerly clean-cut appearance replaced by wild hair and a lab coat stained with gasoline. But what made Reynolds' breath catch were the walls, lined with plastic barrels labeled with the same orchid extract formula the dogs had detected earlier, all connected by a spiderweb of wires leading to a master control box on Voss's teacher's desk. Duke let out a barely audible whine, his nose twitching toward something Reynolds hadn't noticed. A sixth figure slumped motionless in the corner, wearing a police officer's uniform. It was Deputy Collins, the school resource officer who'd responded first to the initial bomb threat. A dark stain spread across his abdomen where he'd apparently been stabbed, but the shallow rise and fall of his chest confirmed he was still alive. Voss clapped his hand suddenly, making the hostages flinch. "Pencils down. Let's share our apologies." He grabbed the nearest student's paper, a trembling boy who couldn't have been more than 13, and read aloud with mock enthusiasm, "Dear Mom, I'm sorry for laughing when Kyle pantsed Jake in gym class." Voss's face darkened. "Not good enough. You don't even mention Sarah." He crumpled the paper and tossed it aside before reaching for something on his desk, a modified taser with exposed wiring that sparked dangerously. Reynolds knew they were out of time. The timer on the wall now read 5:12. He signaled Rex with a silent hand gesture, the command for quiet apprehension. The German shepherd melted into the shadows, his training overriding his instinct to bark. Duke remained at Reynolds' side, his body vibrating with barely contained energy as they watched Rex inch closer to Voss, using the students' desks as cover. Just as Rex was about to lunge, one of the students spotted movement and screamed. Voss spun around, taser raised, but Rex was already airborne. The collision sent both man and dog crashing into the chalkboard as the student screamed. Duke bolted forward to guard the hostages while Reynolds rushed to secure Voss. But the chemistry teacher was faster than he looked. With a manic laugh, he smashed a vial against the floor, releasing a cloud of orchid-scented smoke that made Rex yelp and retreat, his nose overwhelmed. In the confusion, Voss scrambled to his control box and flipped a switch. The entire shelter shuddered as machinery roared to life beneath their feet. Not explosives, but the town's long-abandoned civil defense siren system, now wailing at ear-splitting volume through hidden speakers. The noise was so intense it made the dogs howl in distress, and the students clutch their ears in pain. 4 minutes now, Voss shouted over the din, backing toward a previously hidden exit. "The gas valves are opening all over town, but don't worry, the real show is right here." He pointed to the barrels as a new countdown appeared on their surfaces. 0359, 0358, activated by remote. These don't contain explosives, they contain truth serum, enough to dose the entire water supply. By morning, everyone will be confessing their darkest secrets. As Voss disappeared through the exit, Reynolds faced an impossible choice: chase the madman or disarm the imminent release of a mind-altering substance that could throw the town into chaos. The dogs looked to him for direction, their training conflicting with their protective instincts. Then Deputy Collins groaned from his corner, his bloody hand lifting weakly to point at something beneath the Voss's desk. A second control panel with emergency override switches. Outside, the civil defense sirens took on a new, pulsing rhythm, almost like a heartbeat as the countdown hit 3 a.m. exactly. Somewhere beneath them, pipes began groaning as valves turned, and from the tunnels below came an ominous hissing, the sound of gas escaping into confined spaces. The hissing sound grew louder, creeping through the tunnels like an invisible serpent. Reynolds dropped to his knees beside Deputy Collins, whose bloody fingers were now tracing a series of numbers on the floor. 4721. The override code. Rex and Duke crowded close, their bodies tense as the countdown on the barrels ticked below 2:30. The students' whimpers blended with the still wailing sirens, creating a cacophony of terror that made it hard to think. Reynolds lunged for the control panel under the desk, his fingers punching in the numbers Collins had indicated. A green light flickered, then died. The system rejected the code. From somewhere deep in the tunnels, a deep metallic groan signaled that the first gas valves had fully opened. Duke suddenly sneezed violently, then began pawing at his nose. The first sign the orchid-based compound was already permeating the air. One of the students, a girl with braces, screamed and pointed at the ceiling. Thin tendrils of yellowish gas were seeping through the ventilation grates. Not the truth serum yet, this was something else. Reynolds recognized the acrid smell from military training exercises. Tear gas. Voss wasn't just flooding the town with truth serum, he was herding everyone toward the center of his sick experiment. Rex, despite his distressed nose, suddenly perked up and bolted to a section of the wall where the brickwork looked newer. He scratched insistently at the mortar while Duke circled back to the hostages, using his body to nudge them away from the spreading gas. Reynolds joined Rex and saw what the dog had detected, a nearly invisible seam outlining a hidden passage. The bricks gave way with surprising ease, revealing a narrow maintenance tunnel that smelled strongly of Voss's cologne and something else. Copper? Blood? The tunnel led downward at a steep angle, the walls slick with condensation. Every few feet, pages from Sarah's old diary had been taped up, their childish handwriting detailing years of bullying. The last page, dated the day she died, contained a single sentence: "They'll understand when the gas makes them tell the truth." A thunderous explosion rocked the tunnels, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Not from the school. This came from the direction of the town square. The radios erupted with frantic reports. Multiple gas leaks reported downtown. Fire department is the transmission cut into static as another explosion, closer this time, vibrated through the stone walls. Reynolds realized with dawning horror that Voss had engineered the ultimate psychological trap. The truth serum barrels were a decoy. The real weapon was the town's own infrastructure. Overpressurized gas lines exploding in sequence, creating chaos while hidden speakers pumped out hallucinogenic compounds. People would blame their resulting erratic behavior on the truth serum, never realizing the gas was just exposing what was already there. The hidden cruelties of a town that had looked away for too long. Duke's sudden bark echoed through the tunnel as he alerted to movement ahead. Reynolds rounded a corner just in time to see Voss standing before an antique gas main valve, his hand poised on a rusted wheel. The chemistry teacher's eyes gleamed with madness in the glow of a single dangling light bulb. "You're too late, officer," he said calmly. "The final valve opens in 60 seconds. Then the whole town will see what happens when you let cruelty go unchecked." But Rex wasn't looking at Voss. The dog's attention was fixed on something behind the teacher, a shadow that moved wrong. Before Reynolds could react, a figure lunged from the darkness, tackling Voss to the ground. It was Jake Morrison, his face streaked with tears and soot. "I didn't know," the boy screamed, grappling for control of the valve wheel. "You never told me about Sarah. You just used me." The two figures struggled as the ancient valve shrieked in protest. Somewhere above them, the town's clock tower began to chime ominously, each toll synchronized with a fresh explosion in the distance. Rex and Duke surged forward instinctively, but Reynolds held them back. One wrong move near that valve could trigger a catastrophe. Then came the sound Reynolds had been dreading, the screech of metal giving way. The valve wheel spun freely as pressurized gas roared through the pipes. But instead of the expected explosion, an eerie silence fell. The clock tower's chimes stopped mid-toll. The distant explosion ceased. Even the hissing gas seemed to hold its breath. Voss's laughter was the only sound in the sudden stillness. "You really think I wanted to destroy the town?" He gestured to a series of pipes marked with bright orange tags, not gas lines, but the old steam heating system. The explosions were just fireworks. The real delivery system is much quieter. He pointed upward, where Reynolds now noticed hundreds of tiny nozzles lining the tunnel ceiling. "Welcome to the grand finale, officer. In about 30 seconds, this entire tunnel system will become the world's largest diffuser." A new countdown appeared on Voss's wristwatch. 0030, 0029. The numbers on Voss's watch glowed an eerie green in the tunnel's darkness. 0025, 0024, as the hissing from the ceiling nozzles grew louder. Rex and Duke began sneezing uncontrollably, their keen noses overwhelmed by the sharp, medicinal odor now flooding the underground passage. Reynolds felt the first effects almost immediately, a metallic taste on his tongue, then a strange loosening in his jaw, as if his body wanted to speak without his permission. Voss watched with clinical fascination, his fingers steepled like a professor observing an experiment. "Fascinating, isn't it?" he murmured. "The compound doesn't force truth, it simply removes the filters. All those little lies we tell ourselves to sleep at night, poof." Jake clutched his head, his words slurring as he stumbled against the tunnel wall. I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted it to stop." His confession tumbled out between gasps, his face twisting in horror at his own unfiltered honesty. "They put my head in the toilet every Thursday, called it Jake's Weekly Flush, and nobody cared." His agonized scream echoed off the bricks as the truth serum stripped away years of repressed trauma. Above them, chaos erupted as the gas reached street level. Police radios crackled with bizarre transmissions. Officers admitting to misconduct, a mayor confessing to election fraud, ordinary citizens blurting out affairs and petty crimes. The town was tearing itself apart with unvarnished truth. Reynolds fought against the serum's effects, biting his tongue until copper blood flooded his mouth. The pain helped focus his mind just enough to notice what the dogs had already sensed. Voss wasn't unaffected. The chemist's hands trembled slightly, his breathing uneven. The truth serum was working on him too. Reynolds seized the opportunity, forcing his sluggish limbs to move as he rasped out, "Sarah, would she have wanted this?" Voss's carefully constructed mask slipped. His lips quivered as the serum pulled words from somewhere deep. She left a note, not just about the bullying. His voice broke. About me. Said I never listened. Said I cared more about my experiments than... The confession caught in his throat as realization dawned. This wasn't just revenge for his daughter. It was his own penance. A thunderous crash came from the tunnel behind them, the SWAT team breaching through the fallout shelter. But the reinforcements would never reach them in time. The countdown hit 0010 as the nozzles began spraying the compound in earnest. The mist so thick it obscured vision. Rex and Duke pressed against Reynolds' legs, their warm bodies the only anchors in the chemical fog. Then, a miracle. The hissing stopped abruptly at 0005. The countdown froze. From the darkness came a sound no one expected. A child's giggle. A small figure emerged from the mist. Maya, the sharp-eyed sophomore from the gymnasium, holding up a smartphone with a blinking red override notification. I remembered the IT guy always bragged about the school's smart systems being connected, she said, her words slightly slurred but triumphant. Hacked the ventilation controls from the app we use to report bullies. She wobbled slightly, the serum affecting her too. Turns out the system has a cheerleader override for pep rallies. Who knew? Voss stared at the girl in disbelief. His grand design undone by a teenager using a bully reporting app. The irony wasn't lost on him. His lips twisted in something between a smile and a sob as the truth serum forced his final confession. I just wanted someone to listen. But the danger wasn't over. The tunnels began vibrating as the town's destabilized gas lines reacted to the sudden pressure change. Somewhere above them, the first real explosion rocked the street. Not fireworks this time, but actual infrastructure failing. The ceiling rained dust as bricks groaned in protest. Reynolds grabbed Mia and Jake, shoving them toward the SWAT team's flashlights now bobbing in the distance. Rex and Duke herded them forward, their canine instincts cutting through the serum's haze. But when Reynolds turned back for Voss, the chemist was gone, vanished into one of the tunnel's countless side passages, leaving behind only his wristwatch still counting down imaginary seconds. 001000. The blast wave hit just as they reached the surface, throwing everyone to the ground. As Reynolds struggled to his knees, he saw the impossible. The clock tower, the town's proud landmark, leaning precariously as flames licked its base. And silhouetted against the fire, a lone figure stood at the very top, arms outstretched. Voss wasn't running anymore. He was making sure the whole town finally looked up. The clock tower groaned as flames consumed its wooden supports, sending showers of sparks into the night sky. From his perch high above, Voss stood like a dark prophet against the glow, his lab coat flapping in the updraft. The entire town had gathered in the square below. Not just emergency crews, but ordinary citizens drawn by the spectacle, their faces flickering orange in the firelight. Many were still under the influence of the truth serum, their unfiltered whispers creating a buzzing undercurrent of confessions and revelations. Reynolds shoved through the crowd with Rex and Duke at his heels, his radio crackling with frantic updates. The fire department couldn't get close enough with the gas leaks, and the tower's collapse would take out half the block. But as he reached the barricades, he noticed something strange. The townspeople weren't panicking. They stood in eerie silence, their gazes fixed upward where Voss now held something aloft, an old-fashioned tape recorder. When he pressed play, a young girl's voice echoed across the square, clear as a bell, despite the roaring flames. "Dad, if you're listening to this, I tried to tell you. I tried to tell everyone. But no one hears you when you're the quiet girl." Sarah's voice broke on a sob that mirrored through the crowd. "They took my science medal today, threw it in the sewer while Mr. Hendricks watched. He said, 'Don't tattle, Sarah. Tattlers make trouble.'" A long pause, then the heartbreaking whisper, I guess I'm making trouble now." The effect was instantaneous. A woman in the crowd, Sarah's third-grade teacher, clapped her hands over her mouth as uncontrolled truth spilled out. "I saw them push her down the stairs. I said it was an accident." Nearby, the star quarterback fell to his knees. "We thought it was just jokes. We didn't know she—" His voice failed as years of repressed guilt surfaced. Voss watched the domino effect of honesty with something like peace. He didn't move when the tower's supports began snapping like gunshots. He didn't flinch when Reynolds started climbing the shuddering structure, the dogs whining anxiously below. He simply pressed the recorder to his heart as the first beams collapsed. And Jake Morrison lunged from the crowd, sprinting past barricades with desperate speed. The boy scaled the crumbling tower with reckless abandon, his hands bleeding from broken shingles as he grabbed Voss's arm just as the platform beneath them gave way. They fell together, crashing through awning after awning in a shower of glass and splinters before landing, miraculously, in the outstretched net of a fire truck that had arrived unseen. The crowd erupted as paramedics rushed forward. Voss struggled weakly, his eyes wild, until Jake grabbed his face and forced the older man to look at him. "She wouldn't want this," the boy shouted, his own truth serum honesty making, his voice raw. "Sarah wrote about the flowers you planted together, about the stories you read her. That's what she wanted remembered." The fight left Voss in a shuddering gasp. As they loaded him into an ambulance, something extraordinary happened. One by one, townspeople began stepping forward, not with accusations but with offerings. A baker handed Voss a loaf of challah, the same kind Sarah used to buy every Friday. The elderly librarian pressed a tattered copy of To Kill a Mockingbird into his hands, Sarah's favorite. Small, painful testaments that they had seen her, that she mattered. Reynolds found Jake sitting on the curb with Rex and Duke flanking him like furry guardians. The boy was staring at his hands, watching blood mix with rainwater. "I thought he was helping me," Jake whispered. "Sent me anonymous notes saying he understood, taught me chemistry through the mail." His shoulders shook. "I didn't know about Sarah until today." Rex nudged Jake's elbow with his wet nose, his intelligent eyes full of canine understanding. Dogs never lied. They never pretended cruelty was just kids being kids. Duke rested his head on Jake's knee with a sigh that seemed to say the weight wasn't his alone to carry. As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins of the clock tower, the town gathered in spontaneous vigil, not for the building, but for the uncomfortable truths now laid bare. Parents held their children tighter. Teachers exchanged solemn nods. The mayor announced an emergency review of every bullying report filed in the past decade. And in the quiet eye of the storm, Reynolds knelt beside his dogs, scratching the special spot behind Rex's ears that made the hero K9's leg thump happily. "Good boys," he murmured. "You saved more lives today than we'll ever know." Moral lesson. This story reveals a painful truth, that cruelty thrives in silence, and violence often begins when voices go unheard. The real villain wasn't just Voss or the bullies, but the countless bystanders who dismissed kids being kids until trauma exploded outward in destructive ways. The police dogs, Rex and Duke, became unexpected heroes not because of their training, but because they instinctively did what humans often fail to. They paid attention. They noticed the scent of danger others ignored, reacted to distress signals people rationalized away. True change begins when we stop minimizing pain as drama or toughening experiences. Every ignored plea, every laughed-off insult, every adult who advises victims to just ignore it plants seeds that can grow into unimaginable devastation. But, as the townspeople learned, redemption lies in accountability. Not just for bullies, but for the silent majority that allows bullying culture to persist. The health of a community is measured not by its monuments, but by how it protects its most vulnerable members. Sometimes it takes a disaster to shatter the mirrors we've carefully arranged to avoid uncomfortable reflections. May we have the courage to see clearly before the cracks become explosions.